Hi, we're doing our garden update down here in the propagation area at Bosque Village. We didn't do one last week because life happened, so lots of really exciting things going on. There's a local guy, Chelino, that came by and gave us more information about the plant propagation area. There's a lot of plants in here that we're unfamiliar with. And so just like what buckets have things that are dead in them, or what buckets that are important, or what buckets we can plant up. So some of the buckets that were empty have been planted up. There's one that I'm pretty excited about. There's a citrus right here that has a flower on it that's quite heady and delightful. It's the first citrus in this garden that I've noticed that has flowers on it. Looks like it might be a lemon. Not positive on that. Another exciting thing is we have some volunteer cilantro coming up in some of these buckets here. I'm not sure if you can get that very well, but it was one little patch and I separated it into 4 different buckets. So we will have fresh cilantro soon again. That's the second round of volunteer cilantro that's happened. There's also another little bit here that I've noticed that's come up, so I'll separate that into some other buckets. Tomatoes are doing really well. Craig made some compost tea, and there are some plants down here. These are the bush beans that seem to be doing pretty good, but the cucumbers planted at the same time as the bush beans and the scarlet runner beans are kind of just not doing much of anything. I've planted some cabbage in here as well, just to take up some space, and there are cucumbers in other buckets that will transplant into here that I'm hopeful are gonna grow a little bit faster. But I did add compost tea to a lot of these newer plants, hoping that that will give them the food they need to kind of kick it in. And I think this is like what it's looked like for well over a week. But the scarlet runner beans, the tallest one, is up to here. So that's pretty exciting. I think we're gonna, I don't see flowers yet, but I see the potential for them coming on these scarlet runner beans. If we keep going back, there's quite a few. I did count, there's over 12 volunteer tomatoes in this garden, and there's lots of those plants that have tomatoes on them. None of them are coloring up, but I'm hopeful that that will happen soonish. There's also what looks like empty buckets, and if you look at this table over here, there's a bunch of new starts that Cece and Craig have started some starts here to transplant into the pond garden later, and I've also started, we got some new seeds. So we have some summer squash seeds, and of a couple different kinds, a different kind of cucumber that I was hopeful it would do really well in this garden. And so that's what all those little pots are. Also, we've started some winter squash seeds and some more scarlet runner beans, because the look of the scarlet runner beans is pretty exciting. Today we're also going to be harvesting a little bit out of the salad garden that we started in buckets. And another thing that I learned, this is amaranth. I don't think we've touched on that yet. So there's 2 different kinds of amaranth in this garden. One is this green amaranth, and then over here there's some red amaranth. And I learned that the leaves of the amaranth are really high in calcium and can also be used in salads. So my thought was we might harvest some of that along with what's in the salad bucket garden. Chelino let us know in this area of the propagation garden what's an important plant. This is epizote here, and some trees that are coming up, so we know a little bit more about what to eat and what not. In this particular area, he pointed out a whole bunch of little babies that I didn't feel confident knowing, the little tiny 1-inch babies that were important. So Chelino's gonna go ahead and weed this area. He also planted another bean, I think it's a pole bean, and that's doing really well, like the scarlet runners. Seems really happy. And then over here we have a few things. I did cover it because we were told the birds really like some of the little babies. But we've got some okra, some loofah, some cucumbers. I'm not seeing any lavender coming up in the lavender bucket. The Bola tomato doesn't seem like it's doing very, very well, but the New Zealand pear, which is one of my friend's favorite tomatoes, there's actually quite a few tomatoes in that pot. And there's a little bit of basil coming up in the basil pot. So pretty excited about some of those things. Very hopeful that these cucumbers will be happier. We did both pickling cucumbers and slicing cucumbers. And that's pretty much the update for the propagation area.
Welcome back to the pool garden. We have many things growing in the pool garden now, although maybe not the progress that we had hoped for. So today we're going to talk about what we think are some issues with some soil quality, some testing we're going to do, and then we'll just show you a little bit of the growth that we have. So starting in the front, we have some radishes and some beets that are coming up. So we still have our screens here because we had some bird issues, the birds pecking at these guys. So here the radishes are coming up pretty well, you know, in several different areas. And then at this screen, also some radishes. It seems that a lot of the beets are still really small. You know, we planted these on April 11th and today we're May 7th. So we water these just about every day with a gentle shower contraption thing that I showed in another video. So that's keyhole 1, keyhole 2, keyhole 1 over here. We do have some radishes again coming up. Not too much happening here. We planted some basil here as well, which I believe is what this is. Maybe some other weeds in here, but again, nothing happened too quickly. Back here we have some growth on some kohlrabi. So some of the things look, you know, this one looks eaten, for example. I can see only one leaf and these other ones are snagged, but these ones are getting almost too tall for the cages, so we may lift those up and just let those fly. But that's the kohlrabi. Back here I think is just more kohlrabi, so we can see a couple popping up here, but still fairly small. In that corner we've got some more basil and mint that is also very much at the is it a weed, is it not stage. Coming back to the third and fourth keyholes, the third one we have lettuces, and the really surprising thing about the lettuces is that the bucket gardens that we planted are doing so much better than these. In the bucket gardens we used a mixture of chicken poo, dirt we would call it, which is where the chickens scratched up all the dirt and pooped and, you know, had everything they ate kind of composted into the dirt over time, and Terra encino, which is the composted oak leaves beneath oak trees, beneath the first layer of oak leaves. So that mixture seems to be doing well. This, which is just what was in the pool garden, you know, we see a few seeds popping up, but nothing too exciting. So we're keeping these little greenhouses on here just to see if we can protect them again from whatever predators are coming in here, which we believe are birds. We still haven't caught anything. We've seen some ants and that kind of thing in the pool garden, but nothing obvious. The one thing we have seen, and if we come to it, is we've seen a few holes in the ground. Like there's some sort of burrowing insect or something like that, but we're not sure whether that's eating the plants or not. Here are some more salads. Again, these salads are quite tiny, but we are seeing some progress. So 2 weeks ago, I don't think we had this much. So New Zealand everlasting planted in sort of the corners of the keyholes, between the keyholes, and those, you know, there's some action here, but those look mostly like weeds to me. The New Zealand everlasting actually have a 30-day germination period, so those could be still waiting to pop up, but we'll see. Over here, I believe this is arugula, and the arugula is doing better than the other salads. We kind of saw that in the salad bucket gardens too. So that's nice, and hopefully this will fill in a bit. We've done a little bit in the salad gardens of thinning, because we planted very densely in the salad garden buckets. In this case, we may have to do a little bit of thinning because these are pretty close together. And we did have some success with those, taking some of the thinned arugula and planting them in another small pot, and those are now growing by the casita. So we may do this with this and sort of fill this out more. But I think overall what we've learned as sort of beginning gardeners is that we would probably plant seeds a little bit more heavily and then thin to the directions on the package. So that's the salads. Over here, sorry, I'm coming towards you, are the carrots. And the carrots are, popping up everywhere, but not really growing super, super fast. In terms of true leaves on the carrots, we got some here, which is exciting. So that's some progress. We've got, certain clumps that are growing in certain areas. This is where, we planted a few seeds in each hole and spaced them out with, a little bit less than the directions on the package. But again, I think in the future we may, plant a few more and then thin to where we want it to be. I'm not sure what this is. It looks different, and I think we only planted carrots here. So that's, anyway, put these screens back so that if there's any birds that are coming by while we go down to grab some cheese from our friend Ariel today. Anyway, this is all carrots here. So we can see a nice even coverage, but we'll see if we get some speed in the growth. So we are adding a little bit of that manure tea that Sherilyn mentioned in the other garden update. It's just about, what we did was we read somewhere that a 5-to-1 ratio of poo to water was good, and then we decided, what, for babies we're actually going to dilute that a lot. So we did like 1 cup, filled that with the tea and then filled the rest of the bucket with water, so it's even more diluted. And we've given some of that here, and so it's hard to know whether that's going to make a change. You didn't not do it, so we didn't like do one area with and one area without or whatever. You can see some weird, old bamboo leaves here. We kind of thought that the bush beans might be getting a bit burned by just direct sun all day. Don't know whether that's the case or not, but we just thought, let's try to put some shade in here. So maybe, I'm not sure if you can see with the camera in here, but the bush beans are looking pretty nice. They're not looking as tall and healthy as the ones in the plant propagation area, which have the nice dirt. So we've given some manure tea to these as well, but the true leaves are out. They're just not particularly high. This one's doing quite well over here, a few extra nodes and stems. We obviously have the peppers that are growing here that are doing quite well on the other side of the wall, and those are fun. The grapes, oh, I'm getting a cameraman pointing me to something else, which is the jicama. That's actually really exciting. This is jicama, and so I guess that wouldn't be necessarily true leaves yet, but 1, 2, 3, there's something else there. I don't think that's jicama. This might be jicama. So we planted, I guess a whole side of jicama. Here's another one. So that's good. We really like jicama, especially with guacamole. It's good. The grapes here are not growing super fast, but I guess, in hindsight, 2 weeks ago, they were probably not as tall as me, maybe about here. And then now we've got a grape that is definitely taller than me. I'm 5'10". This one we're trying to train up this oak branch on our trellis. It looks like this one is catching on to that a little bit. And then this one we talked about trying to train it maybe over up into the apple tree that we cut back there. So it seems to be more wanting to grab onto this tree here, which I believe is a pomegranate. At least the one behind it is. I think that's all pomegranate there. So I don't know whether we will change that or what. Then we've got tomatoes down here. The tomatoes are coming up really nicely since 2 weeks ago. Got some morning dew on here. It's about 8:15 a.m. on a Thursday. So we will definitely need to cull some of these tomatoes once we decide which ones are the healthiest, and we'll wait a little bit before we do that. We've got greenhouses on these ones too, again, just to protect them and maybe to give them a little bit more heat and moisture in the beginning. This one is just a solo tomato. We got a couple here. So these are a couple different varieties of tomatoes. I think some are from seed, and some are from Sherilyn's friend Katie. Katie Sweetmeat tomatoes, I believe. So some of them we know what we'll get, and some of them will be more like the volunteers over here. Yeah, we got something growing under all of them. Here we have our volunteer tomatoes. These ones we haven't strung up yet to the trellis because they're a little small still, but I think any day now. I'm pretty happy they're doing quite well. I think these are all weeds growing around in the base, but I did plant some basil sort of in and around between these larger volunteer tomatoes, which now have some tomatoes on them. So this tomato here, and if we back up, we've got a larger tomato here. And yeah, some of the basil, I believe, is this kind of squarish looking leaves here. So that'll be fun to have some basil underneath the tomatoes. And if we move over to the other side, we have our chards. And a lot of action over here. We're not super great at identifying which is which yet, so we're waiting till we see a little bit more life. But there actually seems to be a lot of little things popping up, and I think a lot of those are weeds. But some action happening there. We do have a couple tomatoes that we put in here. This tomato is a little bit small and not happening too much. This guy's growing a little bit more happy. And yeah, more chards and things on this side, I think. So see some things maybe. This looks like a beet actually, but some of these things popping up. So our tomatillo in the corner is still doing well here. We're going to bring our peppers into the garden to plant in the ground pretty soon, and I'm going to run over to the other side of the garden because I think that has changed a lot. We had a blackberry garden in here. Blackberries getting stuck on my hoodie here. Blackberries all in here, but nothing really was fruiting that much, so we basically cut back to the fruiting stage. I think we showed with a Brian video that we had cut a lot of this back. The blackberries are getting eaten by birds before we can get to any of them, so I'm not sure how productive they're going to be for us, but the idea is that when the rains come in June, we're going to cut all the dig all the blackberries up and maybe plant them somewhere else. We do have some buckets here, which we've planted some ginger in. So the ginger kind of, after a while sitting in the cupboard, it kind of grows these like little like ice cream cone kind of things in it that are fleshy and not like the brown skin you see on the ginger. And so we plant those in the buckets here, and then we're going to do turmeric and garlic after. The peppers are sort of encroaching into these gardens. There's some nopales in here, and there's a macadamia tree in the back. But otherwise, we're kind of waiting for some blackberries to come. And again, the birds seem to be beating us to them. And we got some compost tea in the corner there where it stinks, and we don't want it right next to where we're working. Other than that, that's it for this garden, and that's it for the pool garden update. Okay, here in the orchard, not too much happening here, but just gonna tell you a few things that we learned and or changed in the orchard. This tree, which we're still not sure exactly what it is, Cyril thinks it's a bergamot. I didn't know the name last time we did an update. Some kind of citrus. One thing that we learned from Chelina this week was that some of the reason for seeing some different leaves and kind of different type of branches is that this was actually grafted. So on the bottom we can actually see where this one is growing the original rootstock, which is we call the mother of the madre, and then I believe this stuff was all grafted, and so this is kind of the child or the grafted one. Inheritado, I think, is the Spanish term, which is sort of like inherited or something, which is kind of cool. So we've been checking out a lot of, the trees around here and seeing what was grafted and what wasn't. Another thing that's changed in here is a big water barrel that we moved from the pool garden up to the orchard. We wanted it to sit a little bit higher so that we had a little bit more water pressure and just more room in there. We were able to fill this with gravity from one of the tanks up at the lodge. Tried to get a siphon going from this one big tank and really couldn't get it going, so we pumped a little bit of water to a higher tank and then used gravity to get it down here. Hooked up a couple hose fittings, an extra hose fitting, so that we can get water from directly here, and then this hose goes right into the pool garden. We knocked a hole into the wall, and so we've got a little bit more accessible water for now. One thing Brian told me about, which we haven't gotten into and haven't totally cleaned out yet, this little contraption here is actually for pea gardens. So the idea is that when men are staying here, they can come and pee in this little contraption, and this actually goes all the way under into an orange hose and goes deep into the pool garden and brings some nitrogen into the soil. So instead of just peeing anywhere, you can actually use the pee for a useful thing. Pea garden right here. I'm gonna walk up to just show you how some of the apples are doing, and that's all we're gonna do for the orchard today. So these apple trees, look a little bit different than your typical orchard apple trees, I think. Oftentimes they'll sort of cut the middle branches and let the trees grow really wide, so they're really easy to harvest. These apple trees haven't been necessarily cared for too much, but we did come in and do a little bit of pruning, and we just wanted to show you what the apples are looking like. So I don't know much more on the history of these apples, but I think they've been here for quite a long time. We've eaten some of these that have come off looking all right, and this one kind of came off in my hand. I can try it for you. And it's, it's actually pretty sweet. It's not really like a super sour crab apple or anything like that, but a couple of bigger ones up here in the corner. Those are looking nice. The shape is kind of interestingly long, but lots of apples growing on these trees, and we've started to give these, we give them our excess laundry water, which has a little bit of biodegradable soap in it. We give them some compost tea or manure tea, sometimes some compost directly, and we're working on a compost pile as well to bring some more life to these trees. These trees are quite similar. Here are some of the apples on this one, and yeah, all three of these. A little bit more color on this apple here. These guys are just kind of coming off. That is delicious. I could eat those all day. So that's the apples of the orchard. Follow me to the compost pile. We'll just show you that quickly. All right, so this is the compost pile we're working with. This is an adobe structure that was built, I think, to keep dogs away. And we decided to just clear all of it out and reuse it. It's not ideal in terms of getting into or whatever, but we brought all of our kitchen scraps here and oak leaves to put on the kitchen scraps, so we have a good combination of fresh stuff and brown stuff. And once this gets a little bit higher and gets a lot of heat going, we're gonna get that compost and put it on the gardens. That's it. So we're standing here by our most productive avocado tree on the property. There are a bunch of avocados that are doing quite well, and we've picked already a few and eaten them. They're delicious. More to pick. We talked with an avocado farmer about when they're ready to pick, and basically when they turn brown like this is our best indicator. We think this avocado tree is doing so well because it's sitting downhill from the compost pile. So it's possible that nutrients that have come out from the compost have kind of leached into the avocado tree. That's just a theory. We're going to walk you over to where our salad garden is, salad bucket garden, but just point out to you, we had some interesting conversations with Chileno about what plants are cuttable or what plants are weeds. And so we actually tagged a few of them as we walked through the garden with Chileno and said, okay, this one will grow up to be a weed we really don't want. So here we've got pink saying cut. We've got a purple one over here saying keep. And We've done that all through the garden above the terraza, which is sort of a pretty garden with a bunch of roses. Follow me over here. This weed is everywhere, but we didn't know what it looked like when it was small, so now we do, and we flagged it, so this is going to get chopped down. And as we walk over here, we can see where the black deck is and the salad buckets are.
Hola, we're in the salad garden. So that's our first planting. I think it was March 29th. And things are up and looking good and available to eat. So I have been thinning a couple of the buckets. This particular bucket we heavily planted, and so I thinned about 50%. This is mostly this lettuce, Lechuga GL. And so I just harvest the whole plant, snip the root off, and that'll be a baby green salad for us. The arugula, I'm going to do the same thing with. It's a little bit thick, but eventually what will happen is instead of taking the whole plant, we'll take the largest leaves from the outside of a plant, and that's maybe a little easier to see in this lettuce that's not so thick. And when these get just a tiny bit bigger, we'll just pinch off the outer leaves and then have a baby greens salad, and that'll just keep happening over and over and over. The plant will continue to send out new leaves in the center, and we'll continue to harvest from the outside. Eventually, they could be thinned to maybe 5. I think these are a baby lettuce. So the heads would be really small. And so eventually we could thin to that. But we'll probably use most of these for baby greens. Same with the chard. On the chard, the leaves, we'll take the outer leaves as baby greens for some time because that's what we're wanting. If they start to bolt, which means the plant is focusing its energy on making seeds for the future, typically on lettuces, chard being the same, there'll be a center stalk that starts coming out. When that happens, often the whole plant will be cut. But yeah, we'll probably keep these as like a baby chard to add to our baby greens salads. And then we have spinach here. We'll do the same thing. I'll do just a little bit of thinning on that today, which again looks like taking an entire plant out. Anything that's really tight close up to another one, so it won't be a long-term baby greens cutting, I'll take the whole plant out and that'll go in the salad. There's not that much tightness in here, but there are a few plants that are really close together, so we'll thin those out and then start just cutting the outside leaves that are the biggest for salad greens. Baby green salad. We also have against this wall in here, I think 10 buckets that have been planted the same as we did the tubs. And we did go to town, like I